Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from New York City, it is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast. I'm your host today, Kaustubha Das. We're missing Raghunath again. We're hoping he's going to come back soon. Mara, we got Mara here though, steady as a rock. Good to have you, Mara. And we have special guest host Jai Jagannath today. Welcome back, Jai.
Thank you, and sorry again.
Sorry. No. Actually, we got a lot of great response from your appearance yesterday, and I noticed you got a little love.
Yeah, I was deeply appreciative of that, because it's not easy. Speaking in front of like a new community, and you don't know how people are responding to you.
You fit right in here. It's a Bhagavatam people. You're a Bhagavatam person.
Yeah, but you know me, Kaustubha. I have a way of like irritating sometimes, so yeah, I get a little nervous.
You kept it in check.
Okay.
You kept it in where you go with your realizations.
Thank you.
Okay, no. We love you. Even all sides of you, we love. Okay, so I don't know. Any announcements today, Mara? What do we got to say to people?
We got a Bhakti recovery group meeting today at noon.
Bhakti recovery group at noon. Okay, and we're on at 8 a.m. all week, so we'll be again at 8 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, and of course on Saturday and Sunday. That's what we usually do. I'm trying to pull together a very special guest. I'm going to try to confirm that later today for Sunday. So stay tuned for that. And I think that's it, right? We just move on. Hopefully we'll have Raghunath back soon. Okay. So let us dive into the Bhagavatam right away. I got to pull it up over here. We are... would you like to chant the mantras, Jai Jagannath?
No.
No? Okay. I can do it then. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one must first offer their obeisances unto Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Pareshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regularly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and by rendering service unto the Bhagavat devotee, the pure devotee, almost all that is troublesome within the heart is eradicated, and loving devotional service is established as an irrevocable fact. Something like that. That was close, right?
That's why I didn't want to recite it.
Okay. Om Jnanatimarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Vidtam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual masters are very kindly trying to open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge, and I offer my respectful obeisances unto them. All right. We paraphrase sometimes too.
Okay. Noted.
So we read, I think, 2 verses yesterday. We were in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 25, which is entitled The Glories of Devotional Service, wherein we finally have reached that fantastic conversation, the beginning of the conversation between the great yogini Devahuti, and her divine son Kapila Lord Kapila. And she's presented her desire to become, she had presented to her husband her desire to become free from fear. She wanted enlightenment. She wanted knowledge. She wanted to be equipped with the proper vision to see the world so that she could become liberated from her sufferings. And now Kapila Dev is starting to give that. And as I mentioned yesterday, he shared this very interesting idea that it's not necessary that we want to become entirely detached, but we want to become detached from some things, but the best way, he's recommending, the best way to become detached from material things is to become attached to the spiritual. And specifically, he points out, in terms of the spiritual, the sadhus, those spiritual people. Sometimes we want to get away from, you ever feel like that, Judge? You just want to get away from people?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. Sometimes, and it's like that because relationships in this world can be rough. But with the relationships with the right people, or the right spiritual people, they open up those doors to liberation, is what he's pointing out. So he's using the word sadhu. I don't mean to keep putting you on the hot seat, but sadhu, do you know anything about how that word works?
Not
Sadhu.
precisely, but I know the word sadhu actually just means like good.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
sadhu, it is good, it is good.
Yeah, like if someone's speaking publicly and everybody appreciates it, they go, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, right.
Yeah,
so it kind of has a
good.
generic term like that, but
Yeah.
it came to be related to holy persons. And as I understand specifically their quality of, this is not going to sound very appealing, but their quality of like cutting the mind's dangerous attachments.
Yeah.
Santasha eva chindanti mano via sangam uktibihi. So Krishna says this later in the Bhagavatam when speaking about what a sadhu is, or a devotee. He says Santasha eva chindanti, he cuts mano via sangam, the mind's dangerous attachments. So I don't imagine that feels particularly good when it's going on. And so the word sadhu has become related to this notion also.
I was having a conversation with a sadhu who I greatly respect yesterday. And then, we're just talking about our services and this and that. And then I was explaining how I was trying to serve him and this and that. And then he began to cut a little bit. And he was so hesitant to do it, and I said, no, go ahead, say what you have to say. And then he said, well, Kaustubha, sometimes you can be a little bit like this or that, and so,
right.
yeah, but he's so sweet and kind. It was Radha Swami who, is someone that I have that kind of faith in, and someone who's been so good and to me all along. That actually, that's the thing, right? Is like most of us want to do the cutting, but the sadhus, they don't necessarily want to do the cutting, but they cut when necessary, but because they've won your heart over, then they can say the things that need to be heard, hopefully, and hopefully if we're in the right place, we'll be able to hear them. But commonly we're not, because a lot of times it's very hard to hear that kind of thing. But a sadhu does cut. And so now we're hearing what are the symptoms of the sadhu. We heard the symptoms of the sadhu. We heard the secondary characteristics, which were they were tolerant, merciful, friendly to all living beings. They have no enemies. They're peaceful, and they abide by the scriptures. And I like the point that you pointed out yesterday. That was nice. Those are called secondary. In one sense, secondary means because they derive from the primary. But you also pointed out secondary means they're not necessarily always on display, right? That seemed intolerant or whatever. Right? But what is always on display is the primary characteristics, and that was that they engage in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation. They're always engaged in service. So even if their service appears a little intolerant, maybe, or appears a little unpeaceful or something like that, but that primary thing is always there, that they're always engaged in that service. Okay, so that brings us to text 23 today. We're going to hear, I guess we heard about their symptoms, their qualities in text 21 and text 22, and now we're going to hear how they engage themselves. In text 23 and text 24 we'll get to today, I think, which is a famous verse, often quoted verse, real important one. So in text 23 reads, engaged constantly in hearing about me. Here's the engagement of the sadhus. Engaged constantly in hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sadhus do not suffer from material miseries because they're always engaged, because they are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. That's the one we read that yesterday, right?
Yeah, we read that one yesterday.
Okay. So more engagement now in text 24. O my mother, O virtuous lady. Actually, in this verse, I think he calls her Sadhvi. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So he's saying, it's interesting. He's saying, yeah, you need to associate with the sadhus or the sadhavas. But he's calling her a Sadhvi. So like, you're one of them too. Oh my mother, O virtuous lady. These are the qualities of great devotees who are free from all attachment. You must seek attachment to such holy men, for this counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment. So that's the same point that he's making, that if you become attached to the right stuff, then you become free from the attachment to the more detrimental or pernicious. Mara, pernicious, can you help us with that one?
Oh, I think it means dangerous, but I'll
Okay.
get an official.
Yeah, please work on that. And I think, is it here? Yeah, it's interesting because it's the same point that we were working on yesterday. This idea, you gave a very interesting example yesterday, right at the end of the show, about this devotee who's in prison in Mathura, still there.
Yeah, it's still there.
Are people allowed to visit him?
Yeah, they're allowed to come periodically.
I hope they do.
Yeah.
So this was a person who was like, could you just quickly say it again? Because I'm forgetting.
Yeah, his name is Radheshyam Vilas. He got arrested because he was in the country illegally.
Okay.
They wanted to deport him, but he had thrown out his passport because he was determined to not leave Vrindavan. And so because they don't know where he's from, they couldn't deport him. So they're just keeping him in prison. And the devotees came to visit him, and he says it's the happiest he's ever been. He's absorbed in chanting the holy name, 64 rounds a day during Hari Katha. And somehow he's endeared all the prison guards to him. And, the story ended with him actually leading a Janmashtami festival in the prison. And someone put it up on Instagram, and all the prisoners, like hundreds of them, chanting and dancing and clapping. And he's on the stage, jumping up and down, like a Hare Krishna.
Well, Vrindavan's like that, where it's like the prison guard's a devotee, the mailman's a devotee, everybody's a devotee, right? So it's pretty far out. Mary, you got pernicious there?
Yeah, highly destructive.
Highly
or
destructive.
injurious. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this association is going to help us with all the danger, and that's an example, a perfect example, a very graphic example of how being absorbed in Bhagavatam, which is what's being said, it relieves one from the sufferings of material existence, because you're in prison in India. It's pretty rough. Now, Prabhupada writes a little something. He uses an analogy here in the commentary to text 24. He says, because a devotee is freed from all contaminated material association, they are not affected by the miseries of material existence. Even though they appear to be in the material world, they are not affected by the miseries of the material world. How is it possible? Okay, here comes. There's a very good example in the activities of the cat. All right. The cat carries her kittens in her mouth, and when she kills a rat, she also carries the booty in her mouth. Thus, both are carried in the mouth of the cat, but they are in different conditions. So they're both in the same conditions, which appear very pernicious, right? Very dangerous. That particularly to the rat, those teeth of the cat. The kitten feels comfort in the mouth of her mother. They pick them up right by the back of the neck. Right? So the kitten feels comfort in the mouth of the mother, whereas the rat is carried in the mouth of the cat. When the rat is carried in the mouth of the cat, the rat feels the blows of death. Similarly, those who are sadhava, or devotees engaged in Krishna consciousness in the transcendental service of the Lord, they do not feel the contamination of material miseries. Whereas those who are not devotees in Krishna consciousness actually feel the miseries of material existence. So they're both going through it, but they're feeling it in a very different way. One should therefore give up the association of materialistic persons and seek the associations of persons engaged in Krishna consciousness, engaged in bhakti. And by such association, they will benefit in spiritual advancement. By their words and instructions, they will be able to cut off their attachment to material existence. Interesting example. Any thoughts on that, Jai?
Not particularly. I think we covered a lot of the
Yeah.
ideas that Prabhupada mentioned here yesterday, but I did have a thought concerning the notion of becoming attached to a sadhu.
Okay.
I want to put on the table that I don't think the work of becoming attached to a sadhu is exclusively our work alone. There's a part that the sadhu himself or herself is also playing and the development of our attachment. So I was reminded of this verse from Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where the sadhu sangha is defined. And the way it's defined there, Srimad Bhagavatam Artanam Aswado Rasikisaha. So one should taste the meanings of the Bhagavatam from a Rasika, from a sadhu. And Swajatiya Ashaye, he should be like-minded, is how Prabhupada translates it. And then this word, Snigda, he should be affectionate. Swajatiya Ashaye Snigde, Sadhu Sangha Swatovare. This is like the definition of Sadhu Sangha. So Jiva Goswami commenting about this says that unless the sadhu shows affection, then the disciple or he or she who should become attached won't be able to develop attachment. So there is some dynamic there where one is viscerally feeling the affection of the sadhu, and it doesn't mean necessarily like, how are you, patting you on the head, rubbing your back. It could be that also,
Right.
but basically the sadhu is sharing their heart, their realizations about reality, which is ultimately what we're looking for. We're looking for reality. We're looking for entrance into that mystic experience. The sadhu is having that, and he's sharing his own process, how he got to that space and so on. And when one hears that, one feels the love of such a person, and naturally, in a very sort of natural way, one becomes attached. So just last thing on that, Rupa Goswami also writes in this Nectar of Instruction, a book of basic bhakti practice principles, guhyam akyati prichati. So the sadhu is guhyam akyati, means he's like revealing the treasures of his heart, and guhyam prichati, and the he or she who should become attached, they're inquiring about those jewels. And that's sort of the exchange of secret things. The sadhu's got secret things, and I'm the disciples inquiring about secret things. And that relationship is what's causing attachment to become very firm. So I just wanted to throw it out there, because sometimes you should become attached to the sadhu, and you're experiencing different sadhus in your experience in life, and it's like, it's kind of hard to get attached to this one. Are there other options on the table? But so then this helps to like kind of nuance it a little bit. Like the sadhu is also, you're experiencing affection from that sadhu, even if it's just he's speaking and maybe not even doing more than that, but you're experiencing like a tangible visceral affection that is also inspiring the attachment. So I just wanted to put that out there, so that this sort of injunctive sounding verse doesn't, was like, that's a lot of pressure, because every sadhu isn't exactly attractive to me, or whatever it might be.
Well, you mentioned, what was it, the word swajiyata?
Yeah, swajatiya, yeah.
Swajatiya, which is?
Translated, swajati literally means of the same family.
Okay.
But it's generally translated as like-minded, like having the same family or the same aspiration and nearness. Yeah.
Yeah, or similarity, and
right,
and a certain type of similarity that breeds a closeness.
Right.
And so you might not have that with every sadhu. Someone may be possessing those qualities, but there still may not be a certain personal connection or personal closeness that you're feeling. But there should be some sadhus in your life like that.
Right.
And I like how you say guya makiti prich. Guya means secret, right? It's confidential. And you kind of you mentioned it as like there's some treasures in the heart.
Yeah, I was thinking of the verse dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam. So this word guhya can also mean cave. So in a cave, there are like diamonds, for example. Right. So they have treasures in their heart.
And that's that's one of the things I think that as people advance in bhakti, part of it is clearly identifying certain things that you treasure, right? And those are things, and just like in someone's home, they keep their jewels or whatever in some kind of safe, where it's something that's highly valued, something of great beauty and value. and that's protected and literally treasured, right? And I see that, devotees that as one's advancing in bhakti, we find certain things that we treasure, and you keep those things very sacred. They're very sacred to you, and then when you get close to that person, they begin to reveal that. Like some people, for instance, they really treasure the Bhagavad Gita, right? Like, some devotees like that, where like,
Sure.
they're all about the Gita, right? and they it's something that they'll read every day from it, and that's like their favorite part of the day. And if you ask them any question, it always goes back to the Bhagavad Gita, and within their heart, there's like this affection that's grown for not only Krishna but like Arjuna as well, and it's something special to them. And some people, they treasure a particular deity or particular temple. Like that temple means something very special to them. Radharaman temple in Vrindavan is like, my favorite, or whatever, and I like to go there. Maybe it's not even where I live, but I'm always thinking about that place. I have a picture of it in my home, and I go there, I give donations to that place, I try to do some kind of service. And so it's something that they built into their heart. Maybe they know the history of the sadhus that established that temple, and it becomes a little treasure in their heart. And it's these kind of things, right? There's beauty in it, and there's like a way that the heart kind of softens, begins to soften to something special, and then someone can, you can find that within the heart of these sadhus, and if you approach them in the right mood, if you approach them with the right, if the way that you approach them, kind of stimulates within them a sense of compassion or a sense of kindness, as well as like a sense that you're ready to understand because it's sacred to them, right? You don't just like throw it out there to anyone that might not appreciate it, that might be irreverent to it or not understand it. But if they sense, this person wants, is ready to appreciate what I appreciate, then they want to share it. And this is a lot of how bhakti goes from one heart to another,
Yeah, I like to augment that by saying, aside from like sort of technicalities about how one might approach a sadhu, I would suggest that the most important quality is to approach without guile, like without duplicity, or showing one thing and hiding another. And then you get a lot of mercy. I'll just share a really quick story in this regard. So when I joined the Hare Krishna movement, I was completely fanatical, and I used to do a lot of things to irritate my mom. And so she became a little bit averse. And after I decided to take initiation, I wanted my mom to meet my guru, Srila Raghunath Maharaj. And I knew she wouldn't come readily. So I did one trick. I said, would you like to meet the man I'm going to surrender my life to? And I knew that would irritate her, because you're supposed to surrender to God. You're not supposed to surrender to a man. So I knew that would irritate her enough to come and see, just out of sheer curiosity.
Yeah.
So she comes to meet my guru. We're brought to like the office, really nice space. He's sitting on one side. My mom's sitting just opposite of him, and I'm sitting on the floor in between them. And so my Guru Maharaj is like, do you have any questions? And she was like, no. And I was like, oh my God, the ghetto. Like, my mom's a very like educated lady, like 2 or 3 master's degrees. And so I was just like, this is going bad. So I started glorifying my mother, because I have genuine affection and belief in the way that my mom trained me that made it very easy to embrace Krishna consciousness. So I started glorifying her. And then my Guru Maharaj started glorifying her. And when he wants to glorify someone, it's like he has 5 mouths, and glorifying her, what a wonderful job she did. And she completely started crying.
Oh.
Like, and I can promise you, growing up, I saw my mom cry literally maybe once or twice. Like, I very rarely saw her cry. Yeah. And she started bawling like intensely, like what we call ugly cry now. Like, it was like one of those cries. Like, it was like intense. Really? So I started crying. I was like, what's going on? I'm like completely bewildered. And my Guru Maharaj is like very sober. And then suddenly my mom just started revealing all these things about her own childhood abuse, mostly emotional abuse from her own mother and the broken relationship, and how that inspired her when she was training her kids. Anyway, and she just kind of opened her heart. There was no guile there. And then more mercy came, and he started revealing so many, you can say secret things. And so I'm just using the story as a emphasis on whatever sort of technicalities of an approach to a sadhu, like offering obeisances, there are different sort of technical things you read in scripture. But I would say the most important quality, and it's actually a lot harder to do than you would expect, is to approach without guile, and that there's no sense of like, this is me that I'm showing you, and there's another me that you don't ever get to see. And that approach really facilitates a very beautiful exchange of hearts, the exchange of secret things like this. I just thought I might throw that out there.
No, that's real important. And it actually maybe it's the place where we can focus right now, because we're talking about approaching sadhus, but how do you approach the sadhu? And it's that duplicity, I guess we could say it's so common because we have duplicity in us. And so then we even take it into these sacred realms.
Absolutely.
And so, everything becomes even still, not that it hasn't always been there, like, traditionally, but what to speak of in the world that we live in today, where there's social media and, here's my picture with the sadhu, and here's, things like that. But even like, say we go back, like you take a sadhu, like Gorkha Shordas Babaji, right? Who was like, for those that don't know, this is, so Srila Prabhupada, whose books we read from every day here on Wisdom of the Sages, his guru's named Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and his guru was named Srila Gorkha Shordas Babaji, who was like different than some of the links in this disciplic chain, who were like, say, authors and, widely known, figures, leaders of movements and so on. He was a person that was more secluded, right? And very, very deep in his devotion, but it was like, it seems that part of his character, because there's so many stories about him like this, is that he just had no tolerance for that duplicity, right? So people would be approaching him, and sometimes the sadhus, like and this is an important conversation. I think, Jai Jagannath, you're a good person to have this with, because this is something that I pick up. I don't know if I'd call it a pet peeve, but it's just something that I recognize, is that a lot of people come to Eastern paths having been disappointed with their Western spiritual or religious experience. And part of what they're rejecting in the Western thing is the idea that our way is the only way, and that kind of sectarian thought. And they can appreciate the genuine, quality of recognizing genuine spirituality in any tradition.
Right.
But then the pendulum kind of swings, from like, we're the only ones that are right, to everybody's right. Which is not necessarily true. So the kind of hypocrisy, let's say, that they would have never have tolerated in their Western religious world, they become entirely blind to the fact that same kind of hypocrisy will exist also in the Eastern circles as well.
Absolutely.
Right. And so sometimes even the sadhus, right, the so-called holy men or whatever they may be, they are also kind of like profiting off of the faith of others, and what word would I use? Kind of like, I can't think of a word, but like massaging the egos of these people, in a sense, and receiving whether it's even just like prestige or honor that they're getting off on, or it can even be money or fame, whatever it may be. They're kind of getting into it. So Gorkha Shordas Babaji was a person that was like completely intolerant to, and here, maybe this is a good example of how we're saying first and secondary qualities of the sadhu. Like, he was extremely tolerant person. Like, he was so austere, the life that he led, but he was intolerant when it came to this kind of duplicity, and it was very visible. Right. And so there's many stories of wealthy people who are so-called spiritual and like to advertise their own spirituality, and they're going to him and they're asking a question, and he's just like cutting them off, like, like kind of like roughly,
right,
just not taking it. So how does one approach a sadhu? And where do we hear the instructions on this? Like, what is our mood supposed to be? What are our actions supposed to be like? And one place I think is Geeta 4:34 is like maybe one of the most common one. You'd like to quote that verse?
Yeah, that was the first verse that came to my mind. A few others also, but that's the prominent one where we're told to do three things.
Yeah.
Pranipatena literally means to bow down. And I think bow down, aside from the physical action of bowing down, which I think is also very important. I remember doing this exercise with Sachinandan Swami, where he asked us to cross our arms and stand with our head up like this.
Okay.
Like, you could do it. It's actually like a really fun exercise. Like, if y'all want to do it, for those who are listening, you cross your arms.
It's adopting a proud posture of pride.
Yeah, a proud posture. And then he had us like hold our hands, in prayer and bow low. And you can feel it's the psychological difference between both postures.
Right.
So pranipatena literally means to bow down, but on a metaphysical level, it also means that you're approaching the higher domain of knowledge or wisdom, seeking to serve it and not to exploit it. Because the general approach in the material world is, oh, here's some knowledge, I can exploit it for my own purposes. So that's not going to work in relationship to the super subjective spiritual plane. So pranipatena is a metaphysical and physical action. After that, we're told to do inquiry, pariprashna, and inquiries that pertain to the needs of your heart. I think in terms of this relationship with non-duplicity, there's a tendency to ask questions to demonstrate learning. We all been in those conversations before. There's a tendency to ask questions when you have no intention of actually receiving any information. So that's not going to help you.
Why would someone do that? Oh, you mean just to just show their own knowledge as their
through the question, or I should ask something. So it's like, yeah, I have a question, and you just ask it, but there's no gravity, there's no necessity in you.
So it's almost like you're not honoring the value of that person.
Right.
Something like that.
Also, you're not recognizing your own necessity. I think there's that element there, because
your own need.
A genuine inquiry, a genuine one, comes from a recognition of your own necessity, right? Just like when I go to let's say when I go to CVS and I have a headache, I really need an Excedrin. I actually don't take Excedrin. I'm really against pharmaceutical stuff, but I'm just giving that as an example. Because of my necessity, a certain question comes up. What's the best medicine for getting rid of the headache? And because it's my necessity, I'm very invested in the answer that's going to come my way.
Right.
And so, yeah, most souls in this world, I would say, including a lot of spiritual practitioners even, we don't always, or we're not attentive to our own requirements or necessities. So we don't ask the sort of questions that's going to give us answers that are necessary for us where we're standing. Like, for example, amongst spiritual practitioners, we may sometimes be interested in the higher level knowledge and the higher level inquiry, that's on the 6th floor, but honey, you're on the 1st floor. Like, you need to ask those questions right now, So that's like an example of recognizing necessity and putting that before the guru. And again, evolution of inquiry precedes evolution of being. So as you're getting knowledge, that leads you to a new realm of inquiry, and that way you make progress. And then the third one is to render service. So we are to render service to that knowledge, of course, and importantly here, service to he or she who is manifesting that knowledge for our enlightenment, for our deliverance, for our inspiration, for our inspiration for the heart and soul. We render service to that reality. So these three things are told in our approach. But having said that, I just want to add this last point. I'm reminded of the verse from Geeta 4:10, Vidaraga Bhaya Krodha Maya Mam Upashrita. So Krishna is telling in 4:9, this whole section from 4:6 to 4:11, he's kind of deviated a little bit and talking about avatar, like the doctrine of the avatar. Not the last airbender or those blue guys, but the actual avatars from the spiritual world. He's talking about
how he comes himself,
how he comes himself. And in 4:9, he says, just by understanding the stories of the avatars, one can get moksha or liberation. And then in 4:10, he says, there are many persons who have been able to do so, but they had to give up attachment, fear, and anger and surrender unto God. So Prabhupada specifically, when commenting about Bhaya, Viraraga Bhaya Krodha. They have to give up fear. He says because we have so many jaded experiences of personalism in this material world, that we are afraid to be persons. So that means being a person means, again, just speaking to what you were saying, being a person means recognizing like, yeah, there may be 100 bona fide paths, but as a person, there's only going to be one path that maybe really speaks to me. That's like an example of like personalism. But I think more importantly here, personalism means the ability to kind of, I don't know how else to phrase it, but like to bare your soul, so to speak, like to come clean, come naked, so to speak,
Right.
in front of God and in front of the guru, a level of vulnerability, obviously. So I think someone mentioned this word. I think it's a good word here. And putting it before such a personality. And then when you're doing pranipatena, pariprashna, and seva, those three things, with that, without, let's say, the impersonal dysfunction that tends to inform the more jaded mind of people like us who've had a lot of bad experiences in this world,
Right.
then it becomes a very powerful pranipatena, pariprashna, and sevaya. Otherwise, these three things can go on. I personally suffer from this, I think, quite a bit. I'm working on it. This year has been a lot of work in this area, but you can do these things with a lot of impersonal dysfunction. It becomes like rote ritualism, like the very thing that we were afraid of, the very thing we left our other religion for, again, grabs us and takes over our heart. We're just like, I'm just doing the ritual because I'm supposed to do it. I'm asking this sort of question because I'm supposed to ask it. I'm doing this sort of service because it's the right thing to do. But it's filled with like impersonalism, a lack of, acknowledgement of your own necessity, a lack of vulnerability when presenting, and a lack of like honesty, basically. So this is kind of what's coming to mind for me in terms of approach. And I guess I'm personally dealing with this with my own nature. So it kind of rings powerfully for me right now.
Me too. Me too. And you know, I guess in one sense it all boils down to sincerity, right? In other words, all the processes, they're kind of, I don't want to say they become entirely inactive, but the potency of them is there in how sincerely we're actually approaching them. Right. And so that verse that we've been speaking from here, 434, it has to do with, you know, it's one interesting aspect of the verse is it's saying that you approach to learn, but an ingredient in that process of learning, or the process of gaining knowledge from one person to another, has to do with service. So that service means, in others, it has a lot to do with one's receptivity. Two people may ask the same question and get the same answer, but one receives it and one doesn't. It embeds itself, it roots itself in the mind or the heart of one. Whereas another person hears the same thing and they walk away and actually just kind of just rolled right off them and they didn't really take anything. But maybe they were there and they asked the question and they showed themselves as being an inquisitive, thoughtful, spiritual person or something like that. Yeah. But there was, or even a professor, even a scholar may go very deep into these things and question these things and learn so much and actually have more book knowledge than far more than a sincere practitioner. But that sincere practitioner is actually transforming,
Anyway, Maya's got the remedy for that. It's called suffering.
Okay.
So maybe you just need a little bit more suffering for you to get to that place where you recognize your need and be legit about how you're approaching these things.
And then come back and we'll talk again. Okay. So, but interesting that you brought up the point about the difficulty that we have with personalism. And I think that's going to play out in the commentary of the next verse that we read, actually, which is a very important verse. This is a verse great for Bhagavatam, for all us daily Bhagavatam listeners. Text 3:25. Now, we've been hearing about sadhus. We've been hearing about their qualities. And now we're beginning to hear about their activities. And this verse describes the activities of the sadhus, and it describes the benefit, how it plays out in the progressive spiritual life of someone that gets in that association. So maybe, do you want to quote the Sanskrit?
Sure. Satam prasangan mama virya samvido bhavanti ritkarna rasayana kata tajoshanada bhargavartmani sradharate bhaktiranukramishti.
Translation?
And the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin.
Okay, beautiful verse. A verse that's been quoted quite. Any thoughts you'd like to share just on this verse right off the bat, like historically or how it plays a role, coming down?
I think you've said as much as I could say on it. It's very popular.
It's very popular. I mean, one thing is it's quoted 3 times in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, right? So Chaitanya Charitamrita is the biography of Sri Chaitanya, but it's more than a mere biography. It's a book that's really through the conversations that Sri Chaitanya had, both through the author himself, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj, and his own. It's a chance for him to kind of establish this lineage's teachings in a very clear, systematic way, which is all being drawn from Bhagavatam. And through that, part of the way that he does that is his own, you could say his own didactic way of, expressing it himself. But then he also highlights conversations that Sri Chaitanya had, very important conversations that he had, and the teachings come out through the mouth of Sri Chaitanya in that biography. So within Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, this verse is quoted 3 times, and maybe most importantly is in Sri Chaitanya speaking with Sanatana Goswami, who becomes such an important figure in this bhakti lineage that stemming from Sri Chaitanya. And the method that's used in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and many other books of this nature is that a point is made, and then a verse from Bhagavatam is quoted maybe from another source, but maybe even most importantly from Bhagavatam is quoted to establish the validity of that point. And so in his descriptions, in his talks with Sanatana Goswami, which plays out for, the conversation Sri Chaitanya has with Sanatana Goswami is recorded in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but you also see it play out in the books of Sanatana Goswami and in the books of Rupa Goswami as well, his brother. And there's a description of how one's spiritual development grows from beginning with faith and going through different levels all the way up to prema, or pure love of Godhead. And then those stages are described, and then this verse is quoted because those stages are embedded in this verse as well. But why don't we just go ahead and read the commentary? I'll read, and I think some of it's going to touch on what Jai was just talking about, and some of it will touch on what I was just talking about. So Prabhupada writes, the process of advancing in Krishna consciousness and devotional service is described here. Let's read the verse one more time. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart, which is interesting too. I was trying to find any commentary on this. I hadn't found any yet, but it sounds like both on the more superficial level as well as on the deepest level, right? It's the stories are pleasing to hear. They're entertaining. They're fun. There's charm in them. There's beauty in them. There's so much in them. But also to the heart, where all the kind of things that we're talking about, all the kind of, we have to work out all these knots that are there, and when those knots loosen and the deepest spiritual emotions are felt, then that's the most pleasing feeling. So by cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter they are freed, and their attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. The real devotion and the real devotional service. So Prabhupada writes, the process of advancing in Krishna consciousness and devotional service is described here. The first point is that one must seek the association of persons who are Krishna conscious and who engage in devotional service. Without such association, one cannot make advancement. Simply by theoretical knowledge or study, one cannot make any appreciable advancement. Right? So it's saying right there, if you think that you can avoid the help, right, of others advanced bhakti yogis on your path, well, you just can't go around it. You can't circumvent it. He says one must give up the association of materialistic persons and seek the association of devotees, because without the association of devotees, one cannot understand the activities of the Lord. Now here's maybe relating to the point Jai was bringing up. Generally, people are convinced of the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth. Because they do not associate with devotees, they cannot understand the Absolute Truth, can be a person and have personal activities. This is a very difficult subject matter. And unless one has a personal understanding of the Absolute Truth, there is no meaning to devotion. Service or devotion cannot be offered to anything impersonal. Service must be offered to a person. Non-devotees cannot appreciate Krishna consciousness by reading Srimad Bhagavatam or by any other Vedic literature wherein the activities of the Lord are described. They think that these activities are fictional, manufactured stories, because spiritual life is not explained to them in the proper mood. Interesting, yes?
Yeah, definitely. The proper mood. Okay.
Yeah. So really, when we get to Bhakti, there are other yogic paths that, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, they'll be understood as preliminary to Bhakti. They can be practiced as preliminary to Bhakti. Those paths may involve seclusion. They may involve detachment, and they may have no conception of a personal God. It's really about, I'm suffering in this world. I want to understand that I'm spirit, and through that understanding, I want relief. And I don't need any other people, because really they're the ones that have been causing me all the grief that I need relief from. Right. And so I'm not particularly interested in a description of a personal form of God. The other aspect, another aspect of God, I might find interesting, but I have no faith. So when I hear Bhagavatam, I'm thinking, okay, the stories might be good. They might even have some good lessons in them, but ultimately, I just want to be alone. I just want freedom. I just want peace. And so what's being described here is in the association of those sadhus, they know even everything that we've been discussing, right? As you were saying, part of it's on the sadhu to be kind of like affectionate, to be, to have a kindness in their heart, and a sense of compassion for one. And then it's also on the questioner, the person that's the junior person that's coming to that sangha. That their heart is open in the right way, and that their mood is correct, and that it's coming without duplicity, coming forward with humility. That this transaction, this transformation takes place from one heart to another. So Prabhupada's pointing out here, it's difficult to understand. If one has those scars, it might be difficult for one to open up. But in that right sangha, when you hear these narrations, understood properly, explained properly, and in the context of genuine devotion, then the transformation takes place. Then something very special happens, and that's the transfer of bhakti from one person to another. And Prabhupada goes on, to understand the personal activities of the Lord, one has to seek the association of devotees, and by such association, when one contemplates and tries to understand the transcendental activities of the Lord, the path to liberation is open, and they are freed. One who has firm faith. Now this isn't it's alluding now. Now the commentary is going to begin to allude to some very important verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that describe the different stages that one goes through in their advancement from faith to pure love of God. One who has firm faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes fixed, and their attraction for association with the Lord and the devotees increases. Association with the devotee means association with the Lord. The devotee who makes this association develops the consciousness for rendering service to the Lord, and then, being situated in the transcendental position of devotional service, they gradually become perfect. Why don't we check into the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and maybe we can read this verse and discuss it a little bit, or these two verses, Adau Shraddha Tata Sadhu. Okay. This is the translation to and again, this is being explained from Sri Chaitanya to Sanatana Goswami. He says, in the beginning, there must be faith. Then one becomes interested in associating with pure devotees, which is called Sadhu Sangha. So first one, Shraddha, which means faith. Second stage, then one becomes interested in associating with pure devotees. We call that Sadhu Sangha. Thereafter, one is initiated by the spiritual master and executes the regulative principles under their orders. So that is called bhajana kriya. Thus one is freed from all unwanted habits. It's called anartha nivritti, and becomes firmly fixed in devotional service, called nishta. Thereafter, one develops a taste, ruchi, and attachment, ashakti. This is the way of sadhana bhakti, the execution of devotional service according to the regulative principles. Gradually, emotions intensify. It's called bhava, and there's an awakening of love. And that's called prema. This is the gradual development of love of Godhead for the devotee interested in Krishna consciousness. Thoughts, Jai?
Sounds great.
Where am I on the?
I'm not very far along, so we're not going to talk about that. But I was talking to a friend the other day who's a new parent. He's a new father. And since he's preoccupied with taking care of his beautiful son, he's noticed that his practices have been very much contracted. We use the word contracted. And he was feeling a little bit uninspired by that. But then later on, hearing about the different stages of bhakti and also the different nuances of those stages, he felt very much encouraged. So it's kind of nice to understand the sort of thresholds that need to be like thresholds in awareness that are expected to be encountered and to be crossed on the way to love. I wanted to do a seminar on this called Thresholds on the Way to Love.
Okay.
I know it sounds really cheesy, but based on these two verses,
maybe you could get one of the artists that does like the Harlequin romance art, and they could do the art for that seminar.
Well, because like this word prema or love, the word translation love is just such a misnomer because the word love is just used in so many variegated ways now in the English language. But a lot of religions now do speak about love, and you should just be loving. Whereas in the Bhagavatam's presentation, love is very much kind of like a gift received, and you can't just be loving. There are thresholds to be crossed to make yourself as a vessel of love, a suitable vessel. Like if you're a cup with holes in it, then it's not going to be able to hold the liquid. And so we want to make the cup suitable for receiving the gift of love. And these two verses, which is explaining how to build that cup so that we might be able to receive the gift and hold it, they're just like super duper important. I mean, I'm right now covering the Madhurya Kandambini with my own small little group, and where it's a pretty big book describing all of these things. So it's hard to say a lot about it in just a short period of time. But that it is nice to know that there is a trajectory, there are thresholds, we can be aware of those, and we can know what to expect and trying to make progress.
And maybe we could just briefly say, like, faith, it just means, in one sense, it just means the idea that, oh, I appreciate this. I appreciate these people. I appreciate what they're doing. That seems to be a good thing they're doing, Right. One's faith is born. And then that leads to sadhu sangha, which means that I want to seek out those people. I want to spend time in their, in their sangha, in their association, and that's further transformative. And then one becomes a little serious. This is what I want to make my life about. And then the next stage is called bhajana kriya. Kriya, I suppose it's used in different ways, but commonly, it's used to like a process of purification. And so bhajana means, like, in a sense, one's worship. And so this term refers to when one now in a formal way begins to be trained by one bhakti-yogi to another. One accepts a guru, one receives training, they receive the sadhana, they receive, here's the holy name, here's how many times, how often, you chant it, here's, let me give you regulations in your life and practices in your life where you begin to deepen that faith that was starting as just faith. And that leads to a stage called anartha nivritti. So artha means something valuable, anartha means those things that are not valuable, and nivritti means the elimination of. So through one's practice, once you become free, one's lower nature, one's deeper, darker attachments, one let goes of in this stage. And that may take some time, may take some patience, and certainly take some determination. As one passes through that, they achieve a stage called nishta. Nishta means fixed. It means previously my devotion and my acts of devotion and my mind being focused, on devotion was something that would go up and down, back and forth. It's there one moment, it's gone the next. It's unsteady. But as one lets go of one's lower nature, one's mind becomes less distracted and one becomes steady in their devotional practice. Then that leads to a deeper taste in bhakti, where we used to do these things. I chant japa, I chant the holy name in japa, I do kirtan, I read from Bhagavatam. I used to do these things more because they were given to me as my practice, and I felt the need to carry out even my vows to do these things. I may have done them because I knew they were good for me. I may have done them because I knew if I didn't do them, it wasn't good for me. But I did them more out of duty. Now that taste, the ruchi, is beginning to develop, and I begin to just love it. I love to chant the holy name. I love to kirtan. I love chanting japa. I love spending time with the devotees. I love, hearing Bhagavad, all those things. So that's ruchi. And then a shakti is a deepening of that ruchi, where it's getting a little bit, people may think this guy's losing it, right? But like that you're becoming a little addictive to it. It's going deeper and deeper. And then the next stage is called bhava, which is very important because it's described as the sprout of love of God. It's like that little seed that's under the ground, like the shell is cracked and the rays of the sun are shining down on it, and real transformation. The real love is sprouted, real genuine love for God, which is something that it's, as Jai was saying, the word's used in so many ways, but this is the very divine goal that one's trying to achieve, something very, very special and very rare in this world. And so the bhava is when that begins to open up and begins to sprout, and one begins to feel in special ways, special deep emotions of love for God. And then the full blossoming of that is called prema, where one's full love of God is felt and expressed in a particular variety. So that's the path as it goes forward. We're running out of time, but just one thought that's related to what you were saying, I think, is that we may be wondering, where am I on this? And I think, that third stage of, even the beginning stages, we want to do them well. We want to associate well with the right sadhus and so on. And then we're given the practices. And that anartha nivritti stage, how long does it take till we lose that lower nature? It may seem like I'm struggling with that, and I'm never getting fixed. To that unsteadiness is still in me, and it's still in me after so many years. But try to remember as we go through this that different things grow in different ways. Some things, they stay under the ground for a long time, and they're starting to grow, and then at a certain point they pop up above the ground. And so if we're determined, if we're determined that I want to take my life, I want to pass through that stage of anartha nivritti, I'm willing, even related to the things that you were saying earlier, Jai, if I'm coming with that full sincerity and that full vulnerability, that I want to let go of what's lower in me. Here it is. I'm not trying to hide it anymore. I'm recognizing it myself. I'm sharing it with others. These are my anarthas. I want to let go. And if one can let go of that and get to that stage of nishta, then we may find that the plant really starts to grow fast at that point. That it really starts to shoot up, and the gift of prema can be given at any moment. It can be given at any moment by the mercy of the Vaishnavas. Jai, thank you so much for coming on our show again.
Thank you for tolerating me
Come on, man.
For another hour. You guys are very gracious.
Nah, you're gracious for coming on. Mara, do we have any takeaways for today?
We do. We have a lot.
Okay.
Advancement in bhakti means protecting what's treasured in the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Approach a sadhu without guile to receive mercy. Bow, inquire, and render service to sadhus with sincerity and honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Maya's remedy for insincerity is suffering.
Important to remember.
Make the cup suitable for being a vessel of love.
Nice.
Shallow inquisitiveness lacking personal necessity leads to more suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And love is a gift that we need to cultivate the proper mood to receive.
Thank you. And so maybe we all more deeply approach the next threshold of love today.
And though it sounds cringy, but I think it's a good title.
I think it is too. Thank you, everybody. Hopefully, we're going to get Rogan back soon, but in any case, he's in our prayers. And let's see who's ready to dance today.